To discuss this, I'm joined by former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Henry, good evening to you.
Good
Welcome
evening,
to the Independent Republic. Now, you and I have had many conversations about this. Quite recently, actually, we talked about my surprise at finding out that there were sort of sub-Saharan Africans turning up on the shores of the United States, turning up in Tijuana, turning up on the border between Mexico and the United States, somehow having made their way across the Atlantic by some means or other to places like Venezuela, to places like, El Salvador. Is he actually saying what I was saying, that this is somehow a global business, which is maybe not just a business, it might actually be more sinister than that?
It's very much a global business.
Yeah.
It requires, for the organised crime groups to operate, it requires a certain amount of involvement from state or state actors, police, border guards, politicians and so on. And so that's part of it. But also we've got countries and, if you like, non-state actors such as before Al-Qaeda, you've got Islamic State, you've got other terrorist groups operating, particularly across the Sahel and Maghreb, in Africa, sort of below Libya, if you like, for people who aren't familiar with the geography. And so you have them acting, but you've also got, as the Finns have quite rightly highlighted recently, you've got the Russians who've been pushing people across into Finland. They are well aware, the Russians particularly, that the European Union, Europe, has been very liberal, has had a very liberal approach to migration, yet is suffering internal social tensions. It's not just here in the UK, it's in Germany, it's in Belgium, it's in France, it's all over.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
And they are trying to increase that pressure because they want to destabilise countries. Now, in Western Europe, because they want to distract us from the effort of supporting Ukraine. Now, if one wants to dig a little bit deeper into that, I think, and this is quite, this is something I would want to investigate if I was the security service. When you've got parties like the Socialist Workers' Party who are funding and helping to organise protests on our street, the Palestinian pro-Palestinian protests and so on, are we actually looking at a programme of subverting the United Kingdom and other European countries that is an organised programme undertaken by the Russian Federation? I think you would find the answer is yes. So this is asymmetric warfare. And to think it's not going on is really incredibly negligent or naive or both. Now, when I was involved on the ground in dealing with organised crime groups, many of them had links to governments. And, I could name them, but it would probably be unwise to do so because then you'll just have sort of people saying, well, show me the evidence. I was working on the front line in intelligence work on the ground and tactical operations to go and disrupt organised criminals across the southern Balkans. And absolutely, there were embassies of certain countries supporting those crime groups because they had an agenda of destabilisation or furthering their particular agenda in that country. So there's a lot of that goes on. What I find quite stunning about the Prime Minister's speech is that he's not realised this before.
No. Well, this is it. I mean, he certainly had this road to Damascus conversion. I mean, first of all, he was going to stop the boats. Then he was going to slow them down a bit. Now he claims he's managed to stop a few of them. But he suddenly turned into this kind of, what you might call conspiracy theorist who's now going on about how there are some dark forces at work making sure that the West is destabilised. I'm not saying he's wrong, but, previously, whenever I've said it or other people have said it, you've been questioned as some kind of nutcase. You're going, well, why would they do it?
Well, what I suspect now is that, because it is a real danger, it's a real risk out there, a threat. As I say, what I suspect, because Grant Shapps, as Defence Secretary, has said something similar. And
Sorry, I still find it quite difficult to take that as a serious statement. Grant Shapps, Defence Secretary.
I know.
Sorry? When did that happen?
Putting that aside, I mean, we can talk about the politics of the government if you want, because, But he said something similar, and I suspect the security service or somebody has given them a briefing and said, you know what, people, you need to wake up.
Yes.
You're in the driving seat here, and there is a problem. And I think they've sort of started to sense a little bit of reality. In addition, of course, there is the political agenda. There's an election coming up around about 12 months from now.
Yeah.
Sunak's under huge pressure with Rwanda. Rwanda is a flawed concept. Rwanda will not deliver what he wants it to deliver, but he is now in a political bind. He's in this fight to get the legislation through Parliament. I would not support it as a Member of Parliament, a Conservative Member of Parliament, or any Member of Parliament. It will not deliver. It will not deter the migrants. It will not deter the organised crime groups. And at the same time, legally, he's going to be letting himself open for all sorts of problems going forward with the way that the law is drafted. It's a flawed concept, but in a sense, what he says now is correct. Do I believe that he's going to act on it? Because my answer to him is, OK, stop talking about it and damn well do something about it. Right. Because your job is to protect the British people and the British nation against these threats that you keep talking about, and you're doing sod all about it.
Exactly right. Because it begins, in fact, funnily enough, you mentioned Libya, it begins for an awful lot of these people in Libya, doesn't it? Because the Russians are quite well-versed in dealing with African nations. They've got the Wagner group down there on a regular basis in all sorts of different, towns and cities and regions. And you've got wars going on there, which people are moving away from. But they come from Libya straight into a boat. There was a sinking just recently where a load of people died. Come to Lampedusa, thousands of people a day, and then into Italy, then into Germany, then into France, then to Britain. It's not that difficult to work out how it's going and where it's coming from, but they need to get better, surely, at fighting criminal gangs who are much cleverer, it would seem, than every government.
There are three things you need to do it, really. You need the intelligence. Now, we have pared back our intelligence in these areas significantly over the last 15 years or so. Problem number one, that needs to be re-established. It takes a long time to re-establish the relationships you need for human intelligence to work properly. You then need the will to act on that intelligence, which is about the political guts, determination, and understanding of the problem to deal with it. And then you've got to deal with the politics as well, which is part of the will, I suppose, but the political navigation of it here in the UK. Because in the UK, if you went, as I would advocate, hunting these organised crime groups in the Sahel and the Maghreb and treating them as they deserve to be, as terrorists who kill people, who destroy lives, who destabilise states, and actually a lot of the time are associated with terrorist groups and fund them through paying protection or whatever it might be. Go after them, hunt them down, destroy them, because they're as bad as any terrorist group, and as I say, they are associated. But you've got to have the will and the determination to do it. If you like, Russia, with the Wagner group, has gone out there and done it, and is turning it the other way around. They're making migration work for them against their opponents, ourselves.
Yes.
We need to, if we're going to sit here and allow the woke brigade to say, no, you can't hunt these poor people down, you have to put them in front of a jury, then we're going to lose this.
Well, of course, because they're already now offering Christmas discounts for people to come here. Whenever there's a ruling like there was from the Supreme Court, well, as long as there's a ruling from the Supreme Court coming out, it's on TikTok. We found out, for example, today, The Sun have got this story that 2 people have been quizzed about a possible sex attack in a bar in Weymouth, 2 people living on the Bibby Stockholm. We also saw last week, and I got this information, funnily enough, and it was poo-pooed by the Home Office, that the person who had committed suicide was in fact an Albanian, because they were trying to make out that it wasn't an Albanian when the question was put to them. They didn't want to give out any information. They bring the shutters down. They completely and utterly disregard any freedom of information requests. They just don't want to tell you the truth about what's going on.
They're actually in denial themselves. They don't want to accept the reality because then they have to deal with it. And actually, talking about the reality, and you've mentioned Italy and North Africa, the Italians, or the southern coast of Europe, has received about 250,000 asylum seekers in the last 12 months.
Right.
We have received, coming across the Channel, somewhere between an eighth and a tenth of that. There are 26 nations in the European Union. We're getting more than our fair share, and that always moves through. So as the numbers increase across the Mediterranean, it's no good the Prime Minister or the Home Secretary standing there and saying, yes, but look, the rate of people crossing the Channel has reduced, but it's increased in places like Italy, so aren't we doing well? No, you are not, because that flow is going to come towards us.
Yeah.
It will feed through. It does every year.
Yes.
And that flow, we don't know who they are. They come from, and I'm sorry, but it's the reality. They come from cultures that have different social values and different behavioural sort of habits than we do here. Right. And when you bring them in...
And many of them view women in a very different way, right?
Absolutely.
Let's just say it. You know, it's not against the law to say that.
Women, other people's property, you know, just decent behaviour by our standards, you know, they have a different approach. It's a different society. I don't necessarily judge it, but what you have, and it is idiotic. It is ridiculous for anybody to say that when you put different cultures together without any form of integration or assimilation, which we don't have in this country, then you are going to have a friction between...
Because, again, you're not allowed to talk about assimilation and integration because that would be to suggest that people might be different from one another. But the people in Weymouth are talking tonight to The Sun, saying if it was hundreds of British blokes stuck on a barge, I wouldn't like it either. But the fact is, it's not hundreds of British blokes, it's hundreds of people from other countries, many of whom have come without any identification, who might be criminals, you know, who might be terrorists, but who certainly might have, you know, very dubious ideas about, you know, how to treat women. And now we've got an allegation of a sex attack. We don't even know who these people are.
We don't.
And what we also don't know is how on earth they get to roam around in bars in Weymouth. Where's the money coming? Who's giving them the money to go out in a bar?
Well, indeed. I mean, you know, but they're getting allowances, but there's probably money coming in from working for sort of delivery companies and whatever as well. But
that's supposed to be illegal, though.
It is, but we're not doing anything about it because the government... I've said this before, I think, to you, Mike, that you know, back in 2010, David Cameron, who's now our Foreign Secretary, could you believe it, and Theresa May, his Home Secretary, cut the police by about 21,000. We all know that.
Yeah.
But what isn't widely known...
But that's not the problem necessarily, is it?
But what isn't widely known is that they also cut the immigration and asylum staff equally.
Yeah.
So what and it's not been built up again now. So what we need is the political will to recognise this, the political will to do something about it, and the resourcing put in place to actually enact that will and that determination. None of that is in place. And at the moment, communities are getting more and more worried. And I understand that. And they are right to be more worried. The Prime Minister and the government, this Prime Minister particularly, doesn't get it. He keeps talking and he's doing nothing. And you know, people who know Suella Braverman know that she's got absolutely the right intent. But when you've got a Prime Minister that's not actually supporting that, doesn't really get it, doesn't really, you know, well, he's got other priorities, then it's very difficult for a Home Secretary to move forward because they need the Prime Minister's support because this is a cross-government effort. So I honestly believe that Rishi Sunak has to go. There might be an election in a year's time, but can we put up with this for another year? Every day that goes past, the situation gets deeper, more intractable, more complex, and requires a more drastic solution to it. Yeah. So the government needs to get together. It's a whole of government approach that's needed, not one government ministry or department. You know, we've not got the Home Office and the Foreign Office and the Ministry of Defence and the intelligence agencies. They're not probably joined up together because we've got a Prime Minister who is incapable of leading that effort. And I think number 10 is unable to support him in doing so.
I think the wheels are just spinning and they're going absolutely nowhere. Henry, listen, we could talk about this for a lot longer, but we can't because I've got to run. We're going to do something else.